Thank you for auditing Professor Sky's record review, and welcome to the 5th installment of An American's Guide to Balašević, in which I go through each album by Yugoslavia's greatest poet and songwriter, Đorđe Balašević. I do this partly as a gift for my wife, who is Yugoslavian and who loves Balašević more than any other musician, and what I wanted to do when I started this a couple years ago was understand his music, understand his art, because to understand him in some respect is to understand her. To love his music is to better love her. So I did my first video. I looked up on Wikipedia. I did his first album, Pub, and I was very happy, and I made the video, and it got a lot of good response, and I was feeling great about it. And about a month later, she finally told me, Sky, that's actually not his first album. That's his first solo album. But before he was a solo act, he was a member of a band called Rani Mraz, which means early frost. And he recorded 2 albums with them, which you will also have to review. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm reviewing the first album by Rani Mraz, Mojoj, mami, umesto, maturske, slike, Ulogu, To My Mother instead of the graduation photo in the shop window. As opposed to this being a surprise, my wife is actually sitting on the couch next to me with our dog, who you might hear snoring throughout the episode. She might help me with some accents and some things here or there. How did I do on the pronunciation there?
Oh, you don't need any help.
Yeah, that was great. For the last couple of days, I've been like, Mojoj, mami, umesto, Mojoj, mami, umesto. So, I'm excited to do, sorry, what is this? I'm excited to do this review. I've been listening to the album for quite a long time. But the thing is this, I've been developing a lot of larger theories about Balašević. I actually have a project about Balašević, which I'm going to be announcing soon. It's a very big news. I'll be announcing it on the channel. But it's been prompting me to think about him in larger terms. And what I've come to realize is part of what makes him such a transcendently important artist is his ability to reconcile opposites. Things which should not be true at the same time. And in the synthesis of these contradictions, he's able to reaffirm or discover some universal yet often overlooked truths about humanity. I think actually a good American example of this synthesis of opposites might be someone like Bob Dylan, who both takes himself very seriously and does not take himself seriously at all. In that kind of contradiction, we actually have a lot of the art and the power of Bob Dylan. And I'd say that Balašević is capable of transmitting those same kind of amazing synthesis of opposites. And I think we see a good example of that with this album. Okay? I'm not going to pronounce it again. I'll just call it Mojoj, mami for this album, for this review. Because this album cover, I'm going to be using as an introduction to the entire album. A lot of what makes this album strong, interesting, fascinating is found here on this cover. And the first kind of contradiction I'd like to get into is that between the regional and the universal. This album cover is, first of all, very regional. When I looked at this, I didn't understand. Why is there an empty rectangle there? Why are they all kind of dressed up? And I had to ask my wife, what does this mean? Well, it's all about this idea of graduation photos in the shop window. You see, it is currently late spring, early summer, and at this time, in the region of Vojvodina, which is the region of Serbia where Balašević is from, where my wife's family's from, where she went to college, in that region, they have a very specific graduation ritual, okay? So the ritual is this. They have a street, a corso. Good. A corso, and on that street they have shop windows, and in the shop windows they have pictures of all the graduating seniors. And the parents and the babas, those are grandparents, the grandmothers, they walk down the street and they look and they smile with pride at all of the graduating kids. All of the young men and women who are poised to become contributors to society, who have followed the right path and are now on their way to a successful life. My wife wanted me to emphasize the fact that graduating high school has not always been a given in Yugoslavia. It actually does represent a very good chance of making a good living. So this missing picture here is because, as the album tells you, he doesn't have a picture. He wasn't there on the corso. When his baba went down the street, she couldn't point to the window and say, "Ah, there's my Georgie." Instead, there was an empty frame. So here we have something very specific, very regional. Okay? Right now in Western New York, where I live, all over the town, in each neighborhood, there's a giant sign with the name of all the graduating seniors. What is the purpose of that? It's the same purpose, that all the adults get to go and feel proud and know that society will continue and young men and young women will follow the line and do what is expected of them by society. So we have this regional tradition, but then we also have something of a universal theme. The fact that he's not in that picture means that he is disappointing all those babas. He's disappointing his mother. That feeling, that sort of feeling of being a young adult and not knowing if you're doing the right thing. Maybe you're striking out on your own. Maybe you're not following the path that was presented for you. Like that sort of feeling of like fear and a little bit of embarrassment, that's universal. That's how I felt when I graduated high school and I took a year off. I took a year off to become a famous musician. It didn't work out. I'm almost a famous music reviewer, but like that feeling that I had when all my friends were going off to college and all their parents could talk to all the other parents, and it was like, Sky is working at a video store and recording an album with his friends. That feeling is absolutely universal, the fact that he is not there. This leads to the next contradiction, which I believe is the absolute center of this amazing album. That is the combination of pride and embarrassment. The embarrassment is clear, not being in the picture, feeling like you aren't good enough. But the pride is what's interesting, because he's proud of this album. He's not ashamed. He's proud of the music that he's making. He's joking about it in a certain way, but he knows that he has taken the right path. So it's this pride and embarrassment that comes when you disappoint people who have a boring expectation of you. That's what's the key here. Being in the shop window is a boring expectation. Following society's rules is boring. And so when you disappoint boring people, you feel proud of yourself. Again, to make it personal, I spend a lot of time making videos. I am a professor. I should be looking up 17th century French theater and publishing articles, and I should be doing that. And I feel a certain shame that I am not out there publishing like most good academics. But I also feel a little bit of pride, because like I got 13,000 subscribers, people actually care about what I say, like that kind of feeling of pride and embarrassment all at the same time. There needs to be more music about that. And thankfully, thanks to my wife and thanks to Balašević, I have an album that helps to express that. I think what's important is the fact that he's disappointing many people. He's disappointing his mother, disappointing his father. But most interestingly on this album is when he disappoints himself. Because nobody has more boring expectations of you than yourself. And this is a theme that comes back quite a few times in this album. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's keep looking at this album cover and see where it goes. Okay. So first of all, we have this kind of writing here, which I guess was somewhat typical of the boards that they would make with all the pictures of people. We have Rani Miraz, 1979, the year the album came out. Platinista! It's not Spanish. Platinista, which means it's a platinum album. And then on the back, you have a beautiful picture of a Yugoslavian diploma. Of course, it's not filled out. What else can we find from this album cover that tells us about it? Well, first of all, it's a whole bunch of people, okay? It's not just Balašević, it's a whole bunch of people. This is a band album, right? This woman up here, Bijana Kristic, she's a wonderful singer who adds something to his music that I did not hear in the other two albums, this very strong female voice that often provides harmony and sometimes even takes lead. Perhaps most important aspect or collaborator is Josip Bocek. who is a guitarist and an amazing producer. And I'm going to be talking about him quite a bit because this album is interesting as a kind of collaboration. It is considered by Balašević fans just to be a Balašević album, you know, that it's not, it's as much of a collaboration as the rest of his albums. But I'm really going to be emphasizing a lot about these contributions from Klinci and Bošek. So let's actually get into the album. Okay, I'm going to start playing each of the songs for you. Actually, before I do that, apparently, my wife tells me that he misspelled violin. Is that true?
Yeah, it's misspelled on the cover, yeah.
So I guess if he graduated high school, he would have known how to spell violin.
I don't think he typed that up.
He probably didn't. So let's get into the album. Let's talk about it. I should probably tell you the way that I actually review this, okay? First thing I do is I listen to the album. Now, part of what makes me an interesting reviewer of Balašević is for people from Yugoslavia, this music is like their oxygen. Like they've heard it, they've heard especially the hit songs thousands of times, and you know, like they know the words even if they've never intentionally listened to the song. I truly am just some American out of nowhere, so every time I listen to a Balašević album, it's the first time I've ever heard it. So the first time I listen to any Balašević project, I don't like it. I like usually 2 or 3 songs. I just don't. There's something about the production, maybe I don't understand the words, but my initial take is I don't like it very much. Then I listen to it 4 or 5 more times, until eventually, it turns out I do like it. The songs I don't like, I forgive for the things I don't like, and I end up liking it quite a bit more. Then I sit down with the lyrics. I either sit down with the lyrics and through some kind of automatic translator, or now I have the wonderful human translator of my wife. Once I understand the lyrics, everything just changes. Like all these songs where I sort of thought I knew what they meant gain a new, deeper meaning. I'm going to give you a specific example of that soon. After I get to that point, I listen more. And I only do the review after a certain point, which is where when I'm going to bed, it's like I have this album stuck inside my head. And it's like I just keep playing it. And I go to the next song and it starts. And I start singing the song in my head, but I don't know Serbian, I don't know Serbo-Croatian, so I start singing and then I run out of the words that I know. So that happens quite a bit. Zoki zorule, I run out of words and I get them stuck in my head. And at that point, I know I'm ready. When I feel like the album is built into the fabric of my brain, am I ready to talk about it? So let's get into it. Let's go through it track by track. Let's get into what makes it a great album. What are the parts that I think make it not as good of an album as it could be? Let's see. Before I start playing the album and discussing it in detail, there is a sort of unintentional contradiction in this music, and that is in the style. At times I feel that it is timeless, and at times I feel as though it is completely dated. By that I mean sometimes the melodies feel and the way the songs are made feel like they could be made at any point in the last 100 years. At other times it feels like it is precisely 1979 with the way it's produced, with the choice of instrumentation. So we're going to be seeing that conflict throughout the album, and that's actually where a lot of my hesitation comes. When I listened to this for the first time, when I didn't like it, all I can hear is the stuff that sounds dated to me. So let's get into it. Let's get into the first track, Intro, Uvod. And what you're going to hear here is this great combination of dated and timeless. In some ways it's timeless with this guitar work, this nice guitar that builds, multiple guitars, his very kind of high voice. According to my wife, he makes fun of himself for having a high voice when he was younger in his singing, but still it sounds quite nice. There's great harmonies with the female vocalist. The song sort of never really, it gets started, but it feels as though it could have been twice as long. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play it for you a little bit here. I want you to hear this sort of timeless aspect, and then eventually when these keyboards come in, it sounds very much like it's from 1979. So let's get to Uvod by George Balašević. I assume that's Bošek playing the guitar there.
Ja se Slikam za naslovne strane I provodim neke bezvezne dane To znaš Dajem intervjue u Neki ste I dikiram Ka vrhu top liste
So here's going to start building. You hear those keyboards coming in and this guitar, and all of a sudden we're right there in 1979. But listen to those beautiful harmonies. Okay, I have to stop. It's really hard for me to actually stop listening to this music now. I like it so much. So we have that sound, that move, and then we get to the point of what are the lyrics. The lyrics essentially are everything that I just explained to you about the album cover. It's all about the matura, which is this exam that Serbians and Yugoslavians have to take at the end of high school. Now in America we have the SAT, which is not at all an exam that covers the entire 4 years of school. But in Serbia you have to take an exam to pass in order to graduate. It's everything in math and in Serbian, that is to say in literature, and then one other topic. So, I mean, not only literature, but you have to, Serbian literature, you also have to know the Iliad and world literature as well. Now, I asked my wife, so you have to do math, Serbian, and then one other topic. She doesn't remember what her third topic was, but you can get a 1 out of 5. And what did you get on your matura?
5.
She got a 5. I like bragging.
That's pretty common, though.
Is it? Okay.
Most, yeah.
Anyways, whatever it was, she got a 5, but Balašević didn't. He didn't pass, hence the empty photo here. And so what I like here is right off the bat, he's announcing these themes, but at the same time, he's also talking about his ability to be a successful musician. He's talking about how he's being interviewed, about how there's photos of him on magazines, and that this is for her. There's this line where he says, everything I do, and then says a whole bunch of other stuff and ends it, I do it for her. So it's this really sweet thing where at the same time, he's very, very disappointing to his mother for not being in this photo here. Right? But at the same time, he's doing all this for her, and it is actually a gift for her. It truly is replacing that photo, this entire album. The second track on the album was the one that I immediately loved. I mean, even the first time when I listened and I didn't know about the rest of it, this song has that timeless quality. It feels like a folk song while also feeling like a very modern song at the same time. Sve je dobro kad se dobro svrsi, which essentially translates to all's well that ends well. That is, provided that I pronounced it even close to accurately. How'd I do?
You did great.
Awesome. So this is a very easy to listen to song, probably because if you're like me and you're not from the area and you don't know the music by heart, the less instruments involved, so the easier it is to listen to. And this is really a guitar, a voice, and a beautifully misspelled violin. It's almost kind of like a gentle lullaby. When you don't know the lyrics, I thought it must have been some kind of lullaby song because it kind of sings along nicely. The way the violin sounds, it almost sounds like it's laughing at times. There's a real playful quality to this song. His voice is almost in a whisper. And what's interesting, there's a certain restraint with the violin. At times, because the violin usually comes at the end of a phrase, I usually expect it to be like, ba-doo-doo, but it doesn't ever do exactly what you expect it to do. And then the chorus just gets so sweet with that female vocalist coming in, singing up high behind him. There's even a little sound of a triangle in the background. And I had a very sweet moment where the first time I listened to this, my wife comes into the room and she just starts singing all of the words. And it's just this very kind of nice moment. So let's have a little listen to All Is Well That Ends Well before I explain to you more about what the song means, sort of how it means. Let's go here. I guess it's also a waltz. It's worth mentioning. She's trying not to sing. She's like, go ahead, sing. There's the triangle and Kristić singing along. Another very difficult song to turn off. So you hear that timeless mode that I'm talking about. It could be recorded at any point. And then when you get to the lyrics, we get to the next great thing that makes Balašević such an interesting singer, his ability to use nostalgia. But he doesn't use cheap nostalgia. It's never like, oh, things were good when I was a kid. It's always like, I was just as silly when I was a kid as I am as an adult. It's sort of talking about the silliness. Like children have a very vibrant life inside their mind, right? Like if you ever have kids, at a certain point they'll tell you that they believed something for years. And you're like, I could have told you that wasn't true, but kids don't even say everything that they feel. As an adult, he's able to bring out the inner life of a child's mind in his music. And that's what we have in this song. It's a love song to someone named Lana. I don't know if that's a very typical name, but I think it's chosen just for its softness, right? Lana, right? And it's very much about romance and love, but it also feels very much like a romance and love of children. He's building snowmen. Snow is a word I know how to say in Serbo-Croatian, sneg. He's going sledding, and he gets in trouble over her smile. Now this is where we have to talk about the fact, every time I do a video about Balašević, at least like 13, 20, 100 people say, Sky, you will never understand him if you don't speak Serbo-Croatian. To understand his lyrics is to love him, and you will never understand them. I totally accept that fact, but I can at least understand enough to recognize some of the things I'm missing. Like some of the choices that he uses. This word krupan, which apparently means a chunky snowflake. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right? So like just these little details that he's giving. It's not just sneg, it's krupan. I now know too. It's actually very good. And we live in Western New York where it snows 380 days a year. So it's quite useful. And then he talks about falling for this girl like a pubescent fool. Okay? Again, just these nice little terms. I mean, obviously, and this almost goes without saying, the greatest contradiction in his music is of wisdom and folly. He's just constantly a fool and constantly as wise as you can be, which I think ties into another idea of him almost always being a child and an old man, like having the folly of a child and the wisdom of an old man, and in a way he's sort of able to create the synthesis of both of those in here. So he's a fool, but he's describing his foolishness with such wisdom. There's this beauty in the lyric where he talks about the volatility of being a pubescent fool, of being a kid in love, going from sadness to happiness in a single day. He refers to himself as a butterfly in a whirlwind, ko leptir vihorom ponet. And just think about that, okay? I mean, think about being a butterfly in a whirlwind. Is there a better way of explaining the feeling of being swept up in emotions that you can't control? Especially if you have the hormones of puberty and you're feeling all these feelings of being a little butterfly stuck in a whirlwind. But as often happens with the Balašević song, there's a twist. There's a punchline. This Lana that he's in love with is married. She has a husband. Now, there's multiple ways, I think, of reading this song. I had a little bit of an argument with my wife about this. She is positive that what the idea is that he's a kid who's in love with an adult, like being in love with a teacher or something, and that's the twist at the end of the song. And she's probably right on that. But why is this person sledding? Right? Like, why is she sledding?
I don't know, she could actually be a teacher and he could be a student and they're like doing a school activity or something.
Oh.
Or the other option
Yes.
is because he says 3 seasons have passed, prošlo je proleće, leto i jesen.
Prošlo prošlo.
Yes. So 3 seasons have passed and it just could be that she was on the cusp of adulthood and
Right.
that was enough time, passing for her to actually get married.
Right.
So that she might not have been married at the beginning of the song, but she might have been, married at the end.
Right. Good. Well, I think either way it works. I think what I like about it is at the end he says, oh, there's a little detail I didn't mention, and that is that she happens to be married. This kind of unrequited love, this pining, and this sort of foolish state of being a butterfly in the wind. We next get to the song Drago mi je zbog mog starog. Zbog, starog is my favorite 3 words in Serbian because it's fun to say. And this translates roughly to, I am glad for my old man. Now this is a great example of a very, very 70s sounding song. These very ringing guitars and a super high voice, very late 70s synthesizers, and at a point it even breaks down into something of a circus sound. But then, this is before I knew the lyrics, it gets very interesting. There's an instrumental break with like castanets and the sound of an audience, of a crowd going, and the Spanish guitar, almost like Dire Straits level quality guitar. And it actually feels, the first time I listened to this, I'm like, I feel like I'm watching a soccer match. I feel like as I am listening to this music, it is actually what a soccer match is like. Let's listen to that and see if you hear the same thing. It turns out my interpretation of the song being about soccer, well, it wasn't too hard to figure out based on the sound, but it was entirely accurate. This is the kind of song where he's actually taking on a personality. He's taking on the role of a successful soccer player. And it's talking about his pride for his old father. But what's interesting is it's talking about how he started off as a kid and how his dad was always there to support him. But it's also about this problem that happens where the father is starting to take credit for his son's success, where the father's sense of worth is tied in to his son's ability to be a soccer player. In that way, we get this kind of weird, funny thing where he's thankful, but also he's thankful for something which might not actually be that positive. The vocabulary in this song is very obsessed with images of male domination. He makes reference to himself as a czar, as a Vladam, which is like a ruler, right? So there's always this kind of theme of like men in position of domination and position of power, which is all tied into this idea of what it is to be a successful soccer player. There's an ironic tone as well, because he talks about how he left his, in the name of sport, I left my head behind and reached glory with my leg. What I think is also happening here is this is still a continuation of the theme of the album. This is where somebody is achieving something not through the traditional way, not with his head. This soccer player might not have a maturske slike either, right? This might be this sort of metaphor of music for art. I mean, art for sport, right? I'm not quite sure. But the song takes a turn, and eventually it turns out that this soccer star no longer even cares about soccer. He's all about contracts and about money. And I wonder if maybe this is not about the impact of fame on an artist, and the way that it can not be about art as much as it is about fame and about money. But as it goes on, this father figure continues to be there, and he paints a picture of the father being in a bar, getting drunk and talking about how great his son is, about how he's the czar and how he's the king. And a point that my wife made is that the father changes. I mean, the father doesn't change, but the son does. And in a way, this song reveals more about this father and his inability to really be there for his son. You know, just being there through sport and not really being there for him sort of emotionally. So this could be any father. This could be any sport. Ultimately, it's about all these things all kind of wrapped up into one, and I really only feel like I'm just now starting to get it. My wife tells me that Balašević himself dreamed of being a famous soccer player, that he was positive he was going to be a famous soccer player when he was a kid, which I think is quite interesting. I don't know how that ties into this particular song, but when I was a kid, I was positive I was going to be a professional baseball player in Japan, because I knew I wasn't good enough to play in America. Anyways, do with that what you will. Let's get to the next song, which is one not sung by Balašević, but sung by Kristic. I had to cut there. Apparently I was saying her name wrong. Kristic, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's really tricky because if you are like me and you've been trying to learn French for 25 years, then adding on a different kind of R, like Kristic, is quite tricky. So she's taking the lead on the song and singing it. And I don't know, maybe this was like a record company choice or something, but this is a very, very poppy song. It feels as though it's trying to have maybe a little wider appeal. It goes more to that kind of slightly dated sound from the late 70s, but it's just a great song. The reason that it feels at times maybe even cheap is that there's a lot of like, ooh, la 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 la, sha na 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 na, sha la 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 la. But at the same time, the lyrics are so interesting, kind of ironic and serious. The guitar work is great here. It's interesting because in the song, they actually mention other musicians. And this is another theme that is throughout this album, which is what kind of musician is Balašević? What kind of music does he like? And does he make the kind of music that he even likes? They directly mention Corny Grupo, which is the name of the group that Bošek was in before. And they mention Indexi, which that was a gift from my wife for me for our anniversary, because that's going to be my next series of Yugoslavian rock reviews on this channel. So it's kind of interesting because they're sort of mentioning these two groups while also being a little bit more of a rocking mode. You know, right after they say Corny Grupo, there's a blistering guitar solo, which I assume is by Bošek. Although my wife and I are discussing, it might have been a studio musician. I don't know.
No, it is Bošek.
It is Bošek.
He's listed as the guitar player on the album.
Okay, we had a whole off-camera discussion about this. Lyrically, this is sort of the first real adult song on the album, right? It's not from the position of somebody who's transitioning into adulthood or someone who's talking about childhood. This is a romance song about a train. I did a review of the early singles by Rani Mraz, and I think this actually fits thematically quite well with a different song, Oprosti mi Katrin, which is another song about a sort of transitory love that partly takes place in a train station. But what's interesting about this is it's a first-person love song written by a man for a woman. A lot of very specific European details in here. It takes place in July, where a lot of Europeans have a thing which Americans don't know about. It's called vacation. You have time off from work. And just sort of lots of interesting, like looking out the train and then seeing the landscapes, lots of details with where they're going, Ljubljana in Slovenia, and then she like locks on and falls in love with this person, and apparently this guy who she falls in love with, his name's Sasha. If you're an American, Sasha is often a man's name in Europe. Like he tells her that to love is easy because it's human nature. And I don't know if this is intentionally cheesy. I don't know what we're supposed to think about this character of Sasha. Is he like kind of like a fake, deep guy who just is handsome and is able to sort of like impress her? But maybe more importantly, does she know this the whole time? Does she not care? Is he just some hot guy and she wants to have an affair with him, and it's okay if he's cheesy because, there's different kinds of love, and that's this kind of love story. I think that's the idea, because at the end of the song, she just says that she's not sorry twice. Not sorry, not sorry. So really what we have here is a song about essentially free love. I don't think it's like a hippie song, but just kind of a light, breezy pop song about love on a train. There's some of that guitar solo. And there's that just very, very poppy aspect, right? You get the feeling like they had the audience in the stadium in mind, that they were going to be at the Sportska Havala, whatever it is, getting ready with everybody singing along. Another thing, one of these contradictions that interests me in Balašević is the way he talks in a way very romantically. And I don't mean that like romantically, like lovingly. I mean like romantically as in life is like a book. Roman in French means book, and the term romantic doesn't really mean like the way I'm romantic with my wife, but the way that people sometimes live as though they're living in fiction, and they have these ideals and these unrealistic visions of what life is. In that way, love can be very dangerous, right? Because you're not actually loving a person, you're loving an idea of loving a person. This song, in a way, is very romantic in that way, where we have this story of a lover and his eyes meet. But then we also have the opposite of romantic, which is realist, the way life really is. not in some kind of ideal, but in the way life is actually lived. The reason I compare this to Opposti mi Catherine is that's a song about a very quick love affair, and he apologizes for never trying to go visit her, because he knows that it will lead to nothing. The punchline of that song is, this was just that. There is nothing more to this. It is a realistic take on a romantic encounter. And I think this song has the same aspect, where this Sasha, even the title of the song is just called One Sasha from the Train. Like, just, there's just a Sasha, Like, there might be other Sashas. Even though it's this great romantic story, the reality is, he's probably not that great. It's probably not that interesting. He is great at having romantic setups with a realist punchline. The next song sees us returning very squarely into the theme of the album. I'm just going to say this in English. I don't know if I'd ever pronounce it properly in Serbo-Croatian. Influence of relatives on my life's path. Once again, we are in this phase where George Balašević is about to embark on his life. He's a young adult, and what kind of path will he take? Will he follow the boring expectations of his relatives, or will he take a different path? The way that it sounds is very relaxed, and this is something which I really enjoy about his music. This is something which I couldn't have really predicted, but he has this way of speaking and singing at the same time. Like he just starts singing and he's like already kind of tired of being there. He's like, in some ways it almost reminds me of Popeye. I don't know if that makes sense, but like he just has this kind of like weird, personal, goofy way of kind of talking and introducing himself. And the song gets started. At times, in the beginning, I thought it was going to be sort of like a 50s throwback song, which we have a lot on this album. But actually the chord progression gets a little bit more complicated and has a nice kind of breezy chorus, again with Krstić singing along, some very 70s-esque swirling strings. I'm not going to play a sample from this song. I think I just want to establish what the album sounded like there. Very nice harmonies, though, again, with Krstić. And then we get to the lyrics, where he talks about how he might have been a surgeon, but he became a tambourine man. And I don't know if this is an intentional reference to Bob Dylan. I imagine it probably is, although also a very popular form of music in Serbian is tamburashi.
Yeah, no one is thinking about Bob Dylan when you say tamburashi.
Nobody?
In the entirety of Yugoslavia, no one is going, that's a Bob Dylan reference. No, they're thinking about their local, tamburashi band that like plays at all the weddings and, celebrations.
You see, this is what, if I made this a surprise for my wife, I would have made this point about Bob Dylan and been very confident about it. But no, when he says tamburashi, he's making reference to tamburashi music.
We had a tamburashi at our Serbian wedding.
Yes, when we celebrated our wedding in Vojvodina, we had a great tamburashi band. Part of this idea of being tamburashi is just being a working musician. It's not even necessarily that you are this elevated, wonderful artist, but just that you are a working musician. So that's what he is instead of a doctor. As he says in the very beginning of the song when he's doing that sort of, if I had only studied, I could have been a cardiovascular specialist. Each of the verses takes you through a different failure, a different failed class, and the reaction of his father, okay? Seriously, this whole album is about the disappointment, mother, father, and himself. The first failure, the father says, it happens. And then he says, well, see where you are compared to your peers. You're at the bottom. And then he makes a comparison to his brother Sava. This is where it's clear that this is a story about himself, but also he's playing a role because apparently he doesn't have a brother named Sava, so he's just sort of making this a general story. And the brother studied law, and that maybe he should do that as well. Maybe he should become a lawyer. One time in a fight, my dad was very upset with me, and he said I should become a lawyer. And that was sort of his biggest insult for me at the time. I don't know if it seemed the same way here, but this idea that he could be a lawyer. But when he talks about why he can't, it's because of this problem. Mnogo jave, a premalo sna. Too much reality, not enough dreaming. That is why he can't be a lawyer. For him, as he says, life isn't about degrees, it's about living as a beggar and a king, which is sort of the position that he's always in, which is another one of those contradictions. How can you be a beggar and a king at the same time? You can be a tamburashi. How can you be proud and ashamed at the same time? You can be tamburashi. This is how it goes when you dream too much and know too little. That is very much the theme of the album as well. And what's interesting here, I had a long conversation with my wife about this theme in which he says, this is what happens when you swim too much in the muddy waters of dreams. Oh, okay, I get it. I will never understand how great of a poet he is if I don't understand tako to biva kad se previše pliva mutnim vodama sna. But wow, is this an amazing idea? The muddy waters of dreams. So he's talking about dreams, but it's not just I'm going to be a soccer star, I'm going to be a music star. Dreams are muddy. But the thing that I didn't understand, the thing that she had to explain to me, is that this word, mutnim, is not actually just muddy. It's also murky. There's one word in Serbo-Croatian for muddy water and for murky water, which then made me realize, oh my God, those are two different things. Water can be murky and not muddy. Okay? This is the concepts that we're trying to work through here. On his second album, which I've already reviewed, he has an entire song called Blues Mutni Voda, Muddy Water Blues. And I thought this was just a joke about the blues singer Muddy Water. But it really is this concept of murky waters. The future is murky when you are a dreamer. The second time he fails a class, the father says, this is serious now. And he gives some advice. But the advice is the same advice he gave in the first verse. Then we talk about his uncle Jova, who worked at a printer. Too much reality, not enough dreaming. The third time he fails, the father is quiet. Okay? I mean, this feels to me, like what is the humanity that is reached in this song? When you truly disappoint somebody that matters to you, it's silence that hurts the most. Because silence indicates that they already knew that you were going to disappoint them, okay? If they say, I'm so disappointed in you, they had hope in you. Silence is confirmation. It's their confirmation that you are going to screw up the way that they knew you were going to screw up. Telling him that he's diving into the abyss. So what is the way of this young man who is not in the izlogu in the shop window? Well, it's his uncle Zizan, who was a bon vivant, which it turns out is how you say bon vivant in Serbian. There is no English word for bon vivant because in America, we don't know how to live. We know how to work. Just someone who lives well, who drinks well, who enjoys life. And this ends up being the one who inspires him. The other two family members inspire his parents, but this person inspires him. This is what leads him to the success that is going to be in his life. It's a beautiful song, it's a beautiful theme, and it just ties this whole first half of the album really nicely together. Side 1 ends with the song Mnogo Mi Znaci To. It means a lot to me. I gotta tell you something. My wife, she doesn't like this song very much. When I played it, she goes, I get the sense that he just scribbled something down and then they put it into a song. But I disagree. This was immediately one of my favorite songs on the album, despite the fact that it very prominently features a saxophone. And I am of the school that quite often when you feature a saxophone, it ruins a song. The great exception is when the saxophone is so loud. This song hits the saxophone so hard. It actually reminds me a lot of the George Michael song, of the Wham song, Careless Whisper. Like, it has that same feeling. This came out 8 years before Careless Whisper. And it gives it that kind of 70s feeling. But also just the way the song lands, the way the song gets into this nice kind of shuffle with a nice whispering voice. Maybe the most intimate sounding the voice is on the entire album. These great flanged guitars that hit these nice notes at the end of certain bars. And a beautiful synthesizer solo as well. This may be the most dated song on the album, but in some ways, I think it's the best dated song on the album. Before I talk about the lyrics, we just have to listen to the saxophone. Just how saxophone is this? Okay, let's hear. Are you ready for the most saxophone thing you've ever heard? Yeah, the nice kind of like surf rock guitar actually there. But it settles really nicely in this little shuffle here. The drumming quite nice. Have you changed your opinion on the song yet?
I have.
You love it, right?
Yeah, the intro is just great.
The intro is so great. You know, they just go for it so hard. It almost sounds like a song from Los Angeles. It has a very kind of West Coast breezy feel, which I like. Okay, now let's talk about the lyrics. But in order to talk about the lyrics, I needed some guest stars. I needed my dogs here. You see Bo and Toby. Poor Bo has a little cone. He chopped off the tip of his tail in a screen door, but he's getting better. So the reason I have the dogs here is the lyrics in this song are all about appreciating the little things in life. It means a lot to me. It's a series of things which might not mean much to other people, but mean a lot to him. And the first example that he gives are his dogs. like Toby back there giving quite a show. I have a dog that barks and he wakes me up. Much like Toby and Bo will wake me up in the middle of the morning or in the middle of the night. But he wags his tail when he comes home, and that means a lot to me. I have a woman that loves me and sometimes is difficult or sometimes we have disagreements, but she's there and it means a lot to me. Finally, I have an imagination. It carries me to the clouds. It means a lot to me. Just constantly with all of these things in his life, which are sometimes inconvenient, always bring him happiness. And if there's another great theme of Balašević's music, it is appreciation. He's somebody who very clearly appreciates the good things in his life and is able to bring those things to other people. So as I'm sitting here with my dogs and my dog handler, it's actually just my wife again, as they're there, it's this great sense of earned contentment, you know? And maybe, you know, this is kind of a counterpoint to the rest of the album where he's talking about all these disappointments and all these things that he doesn't do and that he hasn't done. But really here, what does he have? He has the whole world. He has dogs, he has his imagination, and he has the love of a good woman. Okay, let's flip the album over and see what's happening on the next side. Oh, Bobo. Oh, am I making a video, Bobo? All right, so I'm going to flip the album over here from side A to side B. And side B starts off with the song Neki, Novi, Klinci, which translates to Some New Kids. And this song is very clearly the best song on the album. It summarizes so many of the things that make it so good. The interplay of the two vocalists, the songwriting, the lyrics, production, which sounds very much of its time, but also timeless. It's a catchy song, and I sort of knew that it had to be this good of a song because, again, I was listening to this album, and my wife comes into the room, and she just immediately starts singing everything and tells me that I could turn it off right there, and she could sing the song 5 times in a row, knowing every word, every single note. Apparently, this is one of his biggest songs. Part of the beauty of doing this channel is I had no idea. To me, it was the beginning of side B. That was all that I knew. And I hope that what these videos can do for you, if you're somebody who loves Balašević, is sort of see how somebody interprets it when they listen. I heard this album and went, yep, this is really the standout track. And it wasn't because I'd heard it. It was just because it has this quality of just being so beautiful. It's haunting. It begins with the sound of like wind and winter, and then eventually this female voice comes in, you know, as like a kind of duet. It's maybe the best duet on the entire album, and just has this great timeless intro, and then this weird break where it actually sounds almost like an electric circus or something, with this kind of like swirling music. It even sounds folkish at times, reminding me of some of the taburashi music that we had at our celebration of our wedding in Serbia. So let's have a listen to this as it starts developing and as it starts playing with these beautiful sounds of, I suppose, the sound of winter. I'm not really sure. I guess the sounds of there. And also in the yes. She's doing the thing again where she's getting ready to sing. So it builds really nicely here, right? With these couple of guitars playing in the background. That really high voice of his early music, I suppose. And it's going to start building soon. So the chorus is entirely hired. The chorus is entirely handled by the female voice, singing that Neki, Novi, Klinci. And then we have that guitar playing, which is very intentionally, I believe, imitating the sound of a tabarashi guitar. So we have a very old-sounding, folk-sounding song. And as we're going to hear in a second, as I move it forward, it's also going to get very modern. With the drums that are in here, and this nice gentle drums and the guitar. And pretty soon we hear the keyboards coming in as well. So it seems as though the song is like jumping through the decades. And here's where it's going to get weird. You hear what I'm saying about this kind of like electric circus, right? Kind of like a funky 70s. Just beautiful. And it all goes so well together, right? That beginning where it's just the sound of the guitar and the singing, and now we're in this moment. And I think this is a moment to bring everybody together, you know, where we're listening and able to appreciate this. Are you crying over there? No. I'm almost crying too. It is such a beautiful song and so beautiful to hear. And I haven't even gotten to the lyrics. It occurs to me that possibly what makes this song so popular is that the lyrics are so good. But truthfully, without understanding the lyrics, I was able to understand the feeling of the song. The way this song makes me react emotionally didn't change when I knew what he was saying. I don't really know how to say that, but this is a whole song about the passage of time. The bittersweet nostalgia of childhood and knowing that there are going to be more children. Again, this is very much an album about the transition from adolescence to young adulthood. And when you reach young adulthood, you start to realize that your life experience isn't that special. There's going to be new kids. You're going to be an adult. It is kind of like, I don't know, Sunrise, Sunset from Fiddler on the Roof. All about this passage of time and generations. Remember how I said one of my favorite things about him is about how he's an old man and a child? How the hell did a 24-year-old write a song this wise about the nature of children, there being more children now, and they'll keep going, the generations will keep going. The pain of adulthood, of remembering childhood, right? Me remembering my elementary school, remembering the swing set where I sat on it and I fell backwards and cried, and you know, my babysitter helped me get up, right? Like just remembering that, knowing that that swing set is still there and that there are new kids there swinging, okay? So the whole song begins and he talks about his grandfather being dead, but his grandmother's alive, with a picture of, I guess, the family saint, which is a whole Serbian tradition, which I'm not going to get into now. But talking about how on the day of his birth, a walnut tree was planted. And in the shade of that tree, there are other children playing. This is a fascinating meditation on mortality and life. It was planted when he was born, and now it provides shade to other children. You know, one of my favorite singers, French singers, who I often compare him to, is Georges Brassens, a great French folk singer as well. And he has a song all about his death. And the first line he asks is the tree that will provide the wood for my coffin still standing? It's an interesting sort of morbid, similar take on this idea of what does this tree represent. The poetry in this song is so painful. So again, she was doing her best to explain it to me. Kroz maglu treperi devet sveća na torti. Through the fog, flicker 9 candles on a cake. So he's remembering his childhood and his 9th birthday. But it's through this fog of memory. It's as though the smoke from the candles is obscuring his view. It actually reminds me a little bit of that muddy, murky water that we were here. He's constantly having his view obscured. And even though he's not a child, he knows that children are going to do what they do. Another example in the song is kids running around and stealing apricots from people's trees. Apparently this is a very specific thing to Vojvodina, which is a very fertile region. According to my wife, some adults from Vojvodina prefer the taste of unripe apricots because they could never steal a ripe apricot because people would pluck them. So kids would steal unripe apricots and eat them, and that would be how they developed their taste for apricots. Sometimes life writes its own poetry, and it seems as though Balašević found that here with talking about these apricots. While he has this memory of this 9th birthday, he talks about something that he got. And you may notice I have another friend with me here. I have this little white rabbit. So he talks about getting a rabbit for his 9th birthday. A stuffed rabbit, right? Not a real rabbit. A stuffed rabbit.
Oh, I don't know, he doesn't say it.
He doesn't say. But apparently...
He could have gotten a real rabbit.
Okay. What I am told by my wife, and these are things I can only know through her, whenever he would perform, he would be inundated. Like the same way the Beatles had jelly beans thrown at them, or Tom Jones has underwear thrown at him, he would be inundated with little stuffed rabbits in love of this song. Apparently, people would write notes on the rabbits, and he would read them on stage. So that's why I have this little guy here. That's why I've been playing around with him, because I like this idea. It's sort of an indicator of all the things I don't know, the things that you can't know about an artist if you're just listening to his music and you don't come from the culture. Going back to that beautiful, crazy break that I just love, that weird circus break, and then he talks about his friend Milutin, who he went to school with, 2 desks over, who now has a 4-year-old. We're going back to this theme of what kind of young adult is he? He doesn't have a kid yet. He's not doing the right thing. He's not continuing along the family line. He's not falling into order with society. The way he describes it is he is gambling with his life. No. He is gambling with life. Life is personified. So he's not gambling with his life. That's not the stakes. He doesn't have the cards and he doesn't say, here's my life. He's playing cards and across from him is life. I've listened to a lot of music. I've read a lot of books. I've watched a lot of movies. I have seen death personified 1,000,000 times. Isn't life actually a scarier thing to interact with than death? He is gambling with life. Death is not actually that scary. It comes and you're done. Life is what you have to live with, and that's what this album is about. He is gambling, and he's gambling against life. And life is a cheater. That's his words. Now, ever since my wife told me this translation, I've just been sitting, I'll just be kind of like walking around, I'll be doing dishes, I'll be walking the dogs, and I just go, life is a cheater. The hell does that mean? It's so deep, I still don't quite get it. I'm still working on it. Life has an ace up its sleeve. He's never going to beat life. Or that's the way that he feels. And again, if you have to choose between beating life and beating death, I don't know. There is kind of a theme in his music with the gambler, the theme of a gambler being an outsider. That's what I picked up from the album Poob, which I reviewed. And it's interesting here, having him here as the gambler against life. At the end of the song, he talks about older people telling him, this is the best time of your life. And I can tell you, that's what happens. When you grow up, older people tell you, this is the good time. No, this is the good time. No, this is the good time. Just remember that. We're going to come back to it. He makes reference to his street, Jovana Svica?
Cvića.
Svica. Jovana Svica, which I actually visited when I went to Novi Sad with my wife. I actually recorded a little video there before I ever listened to any of Balašević's music. I recorded a video there.
No, that's not true. We've listened to Sevdalinka when we were crossing Drina into Bosnia.
Okay, that's true.
I
Yeah.
made you listen to that.
Yeah, we listened to like maybe 2 or 3 songs. But here is me in front of Balašević's house a couple years ago, and I was about to knock on the door, but I didn't want to bother somebody who we respect so much. Okay, it's going. All right, so if you get super advanced into Serbian music, which I'm not, you eventually end up loving a guy named Georgi Balašević, and this is where he lives. Like right now, I could ring his doorbell and bug him, but my wife won't let me because he's a really good guy, and I don't want to bug him. But this is like Bob Dylan's house for Serbian people, so it's kind of cool. We are now going to go from that amazingly tender song, which brought tears to my wife's eyes when listening, to a very upbeat song. And, you know, great albums are made great often by how the songs are put together. And the way this kind of downbeat song about sort of childhood and the passage of time leads into this next song is just perfect. It's an upbeat song with like nice kind of doubled guitars. Sounds very like kind of like a Slavic folk song, but with modern keyboards. Again, kind of continuing on with that sort of electric circus feel that we had in the previous song. Very kind of rhythmically interesting. A little bit more complicated construction on this song than on the rest of the album. The drumming all the way throughout is great, especially at the end of the chorus, with these very nice tight fills. Brr, brr, brr. And then this chorus is just so catchy and so wonderful. And the guitar just goes really nicely, especially the way the guitar is played. There's this emphasis at the beginning of a beat, which just keeps you... The whole song, like just after you've gone through this Neki, Novi, Klinci, this nice relaxed thing, we're now just brought right up. Really interesting rhythms going on there. Now, to really unlock this song, you have to understand the lyrics, because I didn't. I knew it was called Old Song, but I didn't know why. That amazingly catchy chorus, Zorice Zorule, right? That entire song, that is actually an interpolation of an older song. That's why it's called Old Song. It's by... I don't like that I've done this at all. It's that chorus that I love so much. Zorice Zorule. I don't know the rest of the words. The reason that it's so catchy, perhaps, is because he is putting another song inside of this song. That's why it's called Old Song, Stara Pesma. Pesma?
Pesma.
Pesma. That's why it's called that, because he's taking a song that was made popular by someone named Tozovac and doing his version of that just in the chorus. The whole song is sort of about like a love affair where he's trying to like sort of flirt with a girl who's like too nerdy. Maybe she also got 5s on her maturske, slike, whatever, you know, and like he's trying to like break through with her, but he can't, up until they talk about this music. And this is another theme that's throughout the album, is the power of music and the meaning of music. And so it's this like genuine Serbian folk song being played right in the middle of this sort of modern Yugoslavian rock song. And I actually listened to the original by Tozovac, and it's just great. Like, it's a wonderful song. Listening to them back to back really works just nicely, and it just has this really interesting feel where he's really going back to the past. And it's part of what makes him an interesting singer, and we're going to get to that with the next song, is what is even his relationship to pop music. Is he even a pop musician? Is he a rock and roll musician? This sounds like rock and roll. You know, it's got drums, it's got guitar, it's got keyboards, but it has this really older sounding feel. lyrically, there's some pretty interesting wordplay that's going to be happening right here. I don't know if this is intentional, but because I can approach the language as an outsider, he uses the words skoltje and skakljau.
Could those be any more difficult for you to pronounce?
Yeah, very difficult words to pronounce, right? But that's like shells, right? And tickle. It's an uncommon word for the word tickle, skakljau. And just there's something, it seems to me, that when he's writing these lyrics out, he's playing with this fact that these words are so similar. I'll show you my notes so you can see, okay? Skokje, skakljau. And then later he actually talks about picking things up or collecting them, skupio. So it's this weird sort of playing around with these words that all start with sk. I don't know if it's on purpose or not, but it seems to me it creates a lot of the poetic interest in here, these words that have resonance with each other. I guess the punchline to this song is that he walked her home and didn't make a move. I guess it's not a romance song. He just like bought her some ice cream and they went to the beach and they had a nice time. But really, the song isn't about romance. It's not about love or about lust. It seems to really be about this love of this old song. Stara, Pesma. After loving the last two songs so much, I'm sad to report that I believed that I would never love the third song on side B, Mojoj stari Frend ima rock and roll band. It starts off fine, has a synth intro with some nice voice, some interesting chord changes, but then it settles in to a painfully bland, nostalgic take on 1950s rock and roll. Internationally, there was this whole wave of music in the mid to late 70s that was imitating 1950s rock and roll, imitating the formulas, imitating the sounds. And all of it now, to me, just sounds boring and dated. I was positive. I'll show you my notes again. I wrote basically unlistenable. With all these oohs and ahs and yeahs in the back, I felt like I'd heard it 1,000 times and I never wanted to hear it again. The question is this: what about the lyrics? Can the lyrics to this song save the song from my dislike? The answer, of course, is yes. Ultimately, this is one of the most important songs on this album, because this is really where he has disappointed his own boring expectations for himself. It's about not being a rock and roller. He's not good enough for his mom or his dad, but he's also just not a rocker. And this whole song is just like, I can't do it. It seems as though he understands that he would be cursed or blessed to write ballads, to write songs like Stara Pesma, or hell, to write songs like Zorice Zorule, to fit into that tradition of great folk music or timeless music of his people that doesn't fit into the rock and roll mold. Still to this day, my wife tells me the impression of Balašević is often somewhat negative. You know, that some people just think he's not cool enough. You know, he's not like rock and roll enough. He doesn't have that edge. That he's just music for old ladies. And this appears to be a song of him coming to terms with that. Another song about coming to terms with being a successful failure. He could have called this album that, Successful Failure. I sing ballads, he says, to start saving himself for the good times that are to come. He is singing as a young person about the fact that he is saving himself for the old days that are coming. Remember Neki, Novi, Klinci, all the old people who are talking to him saying, these are the good days? For Balašević, he knows the good days are in the future. The good days are when he is as old as the people telling him that the good days are now. It's this odd thing about him where he sings a lot about his past in a mode that you could call nostalgic, but he's so real with his nostalgia, with his memories, that it's actually sort of anti-nostalgia. It's not the sort of rose-colored glasses, things were better then. It's sort of like things were the same then, but maybe I was different, or things will keep going. So when you have a song which by its music sounds painfully nostalgic, you actually see really what it is a meditation on who he is. And so when he's singing sha-na na, 1, 2, 3 in English, yay, 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 going back to French, he's doing it ironically, talking about himself, saying he doesn't have the rocker voice, he doesn't have the rocker physique, but he can still say yay, yay, yay. He can still do it. What makes the song even more interesting is the poetry of the following line. Gde bi bio nam kraj, da svako radi samo ono što zna. If everyone only did what they were good at, what would the world be? So he's making a rock song even though he knows he's not good at it. He's making a rock song despite the fact the rock song itself is about him not being good at doing it. With this band, he says he can relive his childhood dreams, right? But really, his childhood dreams were beneath him. If he had succeeded in being like his friend, he would have been less than he is now. If he didn't disappoint his younger self, he would not be the great artist with so many things to be thankful for in his life. He is disappointed and proud of his choice to abandon his own boring expectations. Excuse me, just catching up on some reading. The next song is called Brakolomac. Did I get it?
Brakolomac.
Brakolomac, which means homewrecker or marriage breaker. This is another song that has somewhat of a nostalgic feel, but not so much for rock and roll. It reminds me a little bit more of kind of more old-timey music, and a little bit in the same way that Queen in their Night at the Opera album, came out with sounds that sounded like maybe from the 40s and 30s. This has a little bit of that feel to it. Speaking of Queen, the guitar work on here reminds me a lot of Brian May with its weird sort of harmonies. And the whole song is a little bit of a different tone. And I think really to get into this, we really need to get into the lyrics, into the song about what it is to be a homewrecker. It seems as though he's almost out of character when he's singing this song. He's almost like kind of goofy and cute, but the female vocalist seems to be almost sort of like sort of call and response. She's sort of singing seductively over the whole thing, and it's clear that the whole song is about being a homewrecker. Now, thematically, this kind of bothers me because it's a very sort of adult position to be in. It's not very sympathetic. Like, it may be real, but it doesn't fit this person that I have been experiencing throughout this entire album. But still, what I like about this is he talks about life if he were in a comic strip, which is why I brought out these little props here, in a strip. If there was a film about my life, or at least a comic strip, I would be the bad guy. So it's this whole kind of song about, maybe again about this kind of romanticism of how he sees himself as being this kind of like dark figure, let's see if I can find a good bad guy. Oh yeah, this looks like a bad guy, right? So that would be him in this comic strip, right? But there is another aspect to the song that I like. So he's not particularly sympathetic. He's not particularly self-effacing, but what I like about this song is it is really about sort of expectations and about loving someone correctly, and it really isn't about him. It's more about this bad marriage that he's breaking up, in which this woman doesn't actually receive any kind of attention or any kind of love. It's really more about the broken marriage than it is about the home breaker, right? I don't know if everybody has a spouse who makes YouTube video series about their favorite musicians, but it's sort of about that. And I came up with another realization. This is the second song about adultery. If we go back to the second song on the album, Sve dobro, All's Well That Ends Well, that's another song about somebody who's in love with another man's wife. Except here, that very childish tale becomes a very adult tale. some kind of unrequited love, now here becomes a requited love. And the husband who snores very loudly, not as loudly as Toby if you hear him snoring. Yep, he's snoring quite loudly. And this husband snoring is very kind of crude, like he yearns to be next to her, he wants to be here. At the very least, if the song isn't in the same mode as the rest of them, he at least has genuine feelings for this woman, and he is trying to respect her and show her this love. So I don't know. It's not my favorite song on the album thematically. Musically, it is quite interesting. And that leads to the final song, which is another oddity. I don't know why, but he ends the song with something that is sung by Kristic. Prodaje se prijatelj. Prijatelj. A friend for sale. Again, I'm not quite sure how this fits in with the whole album. Because thematically, it's all about like having a friendship that is like a friend for sale. It seems to be kind of a bitter, maybe even cynical song about feeling like your friendship isn't worth something to somebody, so they just kind of sell you. Musically, it's kind of a gentle, soft rock song, a little bit of slide guitar for the first time. I actually kind of like the chord progression because it kind of reminds me of The Who a little bit, like bum, 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 but that's all played on the piano, bum, 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 and very nice, gentle guitar work. At times, there's this singing guitar note ooh, behind the voice, which just sounds really nice. Bizarrely, there's like a disco bass line at the end of the chorus. Like, talk about getting stuck in a dated time. But the whole thing is just, it's a weird ending for me. Because like having a friend who you, apparently I could be a male friend or a female friend. It's not gendered because that's just how it is in the Serbo-Croatian language. It's just very, I'm just not quite sure. Is this song cynical? Is it sweet? What is it actually saying? Why isn't it him who's singing it? I'm not quite sure. Interestingly, the chorus is sung, and they don't use the Serbo-Croatian word for friend. Prijatelj. They use friend. So this actually ties in with my friend is in a rock and roll band. There is a weird sort of play in the songs here where we have old songs, Stara Pesma, and then my old friend, Stari, Frend, and then here we have Prodaje se Frend. There's kind of a continuity there, but I don't really know what to make of it. And then the album ends with a very odd outro of Balašević coming on and giving the credits to the album. Weirdly, when you look at the album, like not everybody is credited. Apparently at this point in the band, there were only really 2 full-time members, Balašević and Kristic. So he's like thanking other people, and it's just a weird sort of spoken word. But again, it does that thing that he was able to do multiple times throughout the album where you feel close to him. You know, like when I think back at the song where he talks about the members of my family who put me on my path, there's this very small moment where he just goes, znam, znam. It's like he says, like, I know. That means I know. It's like, I know, I know. Like he says it just like you would say it, you know? This kind of weird conversation that he's having with his audience. You just get wrapped into it. And even if you don't speak the words, you know, when I hear this, I just hear like blah, 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 each, blah, 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 saxophone, right? I don't hear everything. I feel connected to him as a musician. Whew. Okay. Well, there is volume 5 of An American's Guide to Balašević. I will be continuing this series. I'm not sure when I'm going to release the next one. I have learned recently that Balašević himself did watch at least some of my videos. The fact that I played guitar and sang his music and that he watched me sing it makes me so embarrassed. You can't even understand how embarrassed I am with my bad voice and my bad guitar work. And I even did I did a parody of the song Neki Bane. I feel so embarrassed. But you know what else I feel? I feel pride. I am happy that I did it. I'm happy that he was able to hear me sing, that he's happy to be able to watch me talk about his music and share my love with my wife. So once again, he's able to reconcile these opposite emotions all at the same time. I'm gonna have to do it again. I'm gonna have to play just a little bit. The reason that I play these songs and I sing them is exclusively for my wife. So if you're not interested, that's okay. But I'm just gonna play a little bit of that second song for her to have when she's much older and she can look back on these and go, I remember when you used to play the songs. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I did want to thank a couple of my Patreons who I know are Balašević fans, Miloš and Dread Lee. I don't know his real name, but thank you for supporting the channel. And thank you for showing me that there is an audience for this stuff. Okay, until next time, there's the camera. Got some accompaniment by the birds here. Lana je vožila sanke, a ja sam pravio sneška. Dugo sam plaso danke, zbog jednog laninog smeška. Bili smo klinci i bilo hladno i sneg i padao krupan, te sam te zime sarkao zurgadno ko pravi pubertski tupan.
That was adorable.
This video took forever.